Hi guys, someone's got their sound on. I'm about to let everybody in. Hi, everybody. Welcome so much to our webinar on autistic women, how to be a better ally. My name is Tiffany Jamison. I am the founder and managing partner of Grit and Flow. We're an inclusive. Hi, everybody. Welcome so much. We're inclusive consultant. Is that coming in? Women, how to be a better ally.
Yeah, a little bit.
Jamison, I am the founder. So we are going to go ahead and start our webinar. I'd like to first introduce Nicole Seward. Nicole is our director of research, and she's also one of our senior consultants. So she spent a whole month just researching and writing and learning about women and autism. As an autistic woman herself, she was the perfect person to do this. So we are excited. I'm going to just step out of the way because Nicole has so much to say to you guys. So I'd like to introduce Nicole.
Hi all, thank you for joining me today and for allowing me to share all of this great research with you. A little bit about myself, as Tiffany mentioned, I'm the Director of Research and Senior Consultant with Grit and Flow. I have a BA in Psychology and a Master's in Industrial Organizational Psychology. I am a member of the Autistic Women's Alliance as well as the Speakers Bureau for the Asperger Autism Network. I'm a contributing author to the ND Gifts Project. And in my spare time, I enjoy being a board trustee and the music director for WSCA. Today, we're going to be talking about a bunch of different stuff that affects autistic women and can impact them in the workplace. We're going to start with some basic welcome stuff, some housekeeping, and then we're going to move into describing our poll system for today. And then we'll talk about camouflaging, diagnosis, burnout, relationships, sensory regulation, and gender identity, employment, and then we'll end with a question and answer session, though throughout there will be time to answer questions. So the key takeaways that we hope you get from today's event is knowledge of the myths and stereotypes that impact autistic and neurodivergent individuals and how to address them, understanding of the challenges that autistic's experience and how to become a better ally and a support team or system or individual for that person, and a few tips on how to make the workplace more inclusive for autistic individuals. Some quick housekeeping. We are going to enter into an anonymous state of questions and chat and the ability for people to share things anonymously. We are doing this to create a safe space. So while we are here today, please be courteous and respectful with everyone. We understand that questions can be difficult, and we want those questions because it's important to answer those difficult questions to forge through towards inclusion. You can post anything in the chat, but the chat is not anonymous. If you would like to, you can change your Zoom name so that you can participate in the chat without using your real name. And we will post, you can post questions in the chat or send them directly to Tiffany and she will answer them. I know the slide says me, but she's on that today. So send her a message if you want to ask something privately just to her. So we're going to start out with a definition. What is neurodivergent and what does that term mean? So neurodivergent refers to a person whose brain functions outside or in a way that diverges from society's definition of normal. Autism is a form of neurodivergence, as is ADHD, dyslexia, dysgraphia, obsessive compulsive disorder, and Tourette syndrome, just to name a few. This is a really important note before we continue. All autistics experience their autism differently. No two are the same. I can only speak from academic research and my personal experiences, and my personal experiences are unique to myself, and they should not be generalized to another autistic. Language and terminology and research related to autism is constantly evolving. It's important to constantly engage in learning and your language use. Currently, the autistic community overwhelmingly prefers identity-first language. This means that we prefer to be referred to as an autistic person rather than a person with autism. It may seem small, but to our community, it conveys dignity and respect for our wishes on how we would like to identify. And one last note, though some of you may think that autistic experiences are similar to non-autistic ones, for example, anxiety, burnout, maybe even camouflaging, it's important to remember that the intensity to which autistics experience these are not the same as non-autistics. So why anonymous? So as I mentioned, anonymity creates safety for individuals to share their perspectives. We're going to talk and use conversations because conversations shed light on real experiences that are not yet found in research or a textbook. And we're going to talk about tough topics, and it takes courage to ask tough questions and engage in conversation about potentially sensitive topics. We're going to use anonymous polling with Poll Everywhere. So go ahead and take out your phones. This is entirely anonymous. This app will not keep your phone number. It won't show your name when you respond on the screen. Nothing is kept and everything is 100% private. They're not going to keep your number and spam you later on down the road. So if you would like to participate, this is how we're going to do it. Open up your phone and start a new text message and send it to the phone number 22333. When you do, enter into the message box Nicole's 150, and it should automatically bring you up, or when you text the phone number 223 to Nicole's 50, it should pop up, you should be in. So we're going to try a few starting poll questions to see if people are able to connect and use the software. Okay, let's start out with, how do you feel today? A, B, C, D, E. So, oh, look at that. We're all over the place. Yeah, so most people are feeling pretty cool today. Yeah, I might be with the C's just because it's really nerve-wracking to do a webinar. So I'm not sad, but I'm definitely nervous. Yeah, feeling a little crazy. Yeah, okay. So we're all in good. It seems like everybody is able to use the poll correctly. Here's another one. So how do you feel about engaging in conversation today? That one not working? Oh, there we go. Great. Most of you are neutral. That's wonderful. I'm happy to know that, so we'll get more out of our conversation. Okay, we're going to move on. So we're going to talk about some truths, myths, and stereotypes that relate to the neurodivergent community and autism. So you're going to tell me, I'm going to read each statement, and you're going to type in the chat, autistic people, whether or not what I say is a myth, a truth, or a stereotype. So autistic people cannot work or do not want to work. Is that a myth, truth, or stereotype? Well, that's a myth. Approximately 85% of autistics are unemployed or underemployed, and 69% want to be working. Next, only boys are diagnosed with autism. Yeah, the stereotype. Currently, 1 in 42 males are diagnosed as autistic, compared with 1 in 189 females. It is entirely likely that autism is present equally in both sexes, but because researchers and clinicians have historically left women out of research and autism studies, there's really no way to know at this point. Oh, I threw the answer up early on that one. So it's false that all autistics prefer not to socialize or talk with others and engage socially. As I mentioned at the start, we're all different. Some of us are incredibly chatty, like myself, and others prefer not to engage in social communication at all. Some will engage depending on the group that they're in or the situation. So next, you can tell by looking at someone that they are autistic. Yeah. Myth, definitely. Autism does not look like anything. We are all different with different levels of ability. For some, their autistic traits are non-visible, and for others, they can, you can probably spot or identify them. And as an autistic individual, and I'm sure if there's autistic people here today, they can relate that once you're autistic, you can spot a neurodivergent or an autistic individual before they even tell you. We have like a radar for that. Next, sound, light, and touch are painfully physical for some autistics. Yeah, true, very true. So, and this is all, we're going to talk about this, but this is due to sensory processing and input. Next, if you can make eye contact and engage in a back and forth conversation, you are not autistic. Yeah, that's a stereotype. So all autistics are different. Some of us make eye contact well. We've learned it through masking how to do it. Others don't have trouble with it at all, and some cannot do it because it creates an intense amount of anxiety. So last but not least, this is an important one to our community. Some people say, aren't we all a little autistic? So do you think this is a myth, a truth, or a stereotype? Yeah. With an exclamation point even. It's a myth. We aren't all a little autistic. And as I mentioned, though you may see some similarities in autistic behavior, the way that we experience them is far more intense than you may realize or could ever imagine without putting yourself or living inside of one of our minds and bodies for a day. Okay, moving on. So Throughout the month of March, I released 4 papers or articles that were research and my personal experience combined. We're going to kind of wrap that up today. So first, we're going to talk about camouflaging and masking. So this is mimicking the behavior of peers to learn social communication, to blend in, seek acceptance. If it is done unsuccessfully or forced, it may be associated with high stress, low mood, low self-esteem, and suicidality. It's often done to reduce the appearance of autistic traits, such as stimming, and to appear, quote, normal. For example, forcing to make eye contact. There's a lot of therapies that autistic individuals grow up with that aim to try to make them less autistic and appear more non-autistic. And that's really just done to make the people around us comfortable. So masking and camouflaging can be done both consciously and unconsciously. It's often a form of self-protection. Older individuals who are not diagnosed till later in their life probably learned how to mask so well that they don't know how to drop that mask. Camouflaging can delay a diagnosis and or cause burnout. And it's very different from the intensity that that a non-autistic person might experience. It comes with an intense level of exhaustion. And for me, it's like walking through mud with my head floating above me. I'm moving really slow and I'm detached and it's kind of floating out in outer space. And I'm disconnected from how to understand social communication. It takes a lot of effort. I'm second guessing myself constantly. Did I say the right thing? Did I say the right thing? So it can be really intense and you're always fearing that you've said something wrong. And over time, this creates a lower self-confidence, self-esteem, and a reduced if you go on to experience burnout, you can be, your daily functions can even be reduced. So it's much more intense than masking like we do impression management. A lot of people manage their impressions with different people. We're different people at work, or we try to portray a different image at work than we do at home with our friends. But the experience for us is very intense and it is different than the experience of being shy. Misdiagnosis. So women are commonly misdiagnosed before receiving their autism diagnosis. They're often misdiagnosed with bipolar, anxiety, panic disorders, depression, borderline personality disorder. In my adult years, I've learned a lot about who I am, and what I've learned has quite literally saved my life. It's amazing how many years that we can live without fully understanding ourselves, because the science community and healthcare just doesn't fully understand how neurodivergent brains interact with environments, as well as the fact that we are not all assured the same healthcare or access to healthcare. When I was growing up, there was a lack of information about autism. And because of this, I was often viewed as a challenging child or sometimes even a bad girl. But because I was exceptionally bright, my challenges were overlooked and I just had to try harder. I joined a lot of after school activities, yearbook, rock climbing, so many. And I met a lot of people, but after school, I was still lonely because I didn't know how to make friends from school and then interact with them after school. And so I always felt different. And unfortunately, the kids in my school let me know that I was different by teasing me and bullying me. Panic attacks for me started at age 6 while I was at a Girl Scout sleepaway camp. And by the time I was a teen and adult, I was experiencing multiple panic attacks daily that would knock me to the floor. I didn't know why, and the medicine that I was taking didn't work. Doctors misdiagnosed me at age 21 with panic disorder. And that misdiagnosis also gave me the wrong care, but it also prevented me from accessing the understanding that I actually needed about myself in order to build successful strategies to compensate for some of my challenges. Here's Carly, someone we interviewed.
Did you experience being misdiagnosed? And was it difficult for you to receive your autism diagnosis?
I actually have had almost every single mental health diagnosis that exists prior to getting my autism diagnosis. Ran the gamut first, started in junior high. I was suicidal from bullying throughout my elementary school years, and so my parents took me to get help and got a myriad of diagnoses over the years. At one point, someone diagnosed me with 4 different personality disorders at the same time, even though you can only have one. I had one doctor, after talking to me for 10-15 minutes, decide that I was schizophrenic because she thought I was delusional when I told her I was different from everybody else. The meds she put me on almost put me in a coma, so we realized that's not a good diagnosis for me. I eventually, because of depression and anxiety, ended up on Social Security disability with major depressive disorder until I came across a Time magazine article about a little boy with autism, and the light bulb went off. And so I got diagnosed by UCLA when I was 28.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing.
Okay, so now we're going to talk a little bit about burnout. There are individuals who are non-autistic that do experience burnout, but autistic burnout is characterized by chronic exhaustion, a loss of skills, and a reduced tolerance to stimulus. So the loss of skills that happens are related to thinking, remembering, creating, and executing plans, performing activities of daily living and living independently, from taking a shower to making yourself a snack or even a meal. It impacts our ability to socialize and regulate our emotions. We tend to become more overstimulated during these times, and we might experience increased meltdowns and shutdowns. Just as a note, the autistic community did not come up with the term meltdown and shutdown, and some of us do not love that word, but that's all we got right now. So, and then also during burnout, the avoidance of stimulation, including social engagements, environments, and activities, can make you depressed and you're withdrawn. And skills that were present before burnout are lost during and after burnout. Skills may not return to their baseline, and it may take months or even years to recover. So it's really important to make sure that if you have an autistic individual in your life, you can help them when they are experiencing times of extreme anxiety or stress so that it does not get to the point of burnout. So we're going to take some time for some questions here. You can either put them in the chat if for some reason the polling isn't working, or you can enter them here. So let's see. We have any? What happens after work when you've had to camouflage all day? Well, I can tell you that I have a very supportive husband, and I'm grateful for that. I don't think I would be as successful without his support. If I have a rough day, I'm likely to just sit mostly mute on the couch. I might call my mom and vent, but I'm likely to stay quiet. I'm likely to stay in my same spot. I may need to cover my head with a blanket. I have no ability to camouflage or mask after that, which can be struggle. We don't argue, but it does create a different dynamic for us in the house because we're not as engaged with one another. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, moving on. Oh, what do you want employers to know about masking? And how can we make it safe to not have to? So one of the biggest things that you should know is that because we do it as a self-protective mechanism, a lot of us are probably not going to drop our mask. We're probably going to keep it up until we know that the situation we're in is a safe one and allows us to drop that mask. And if the culture of the workplace is not accepting or inclusive, or we've experienced some other discrimination or judgment in the workplace because of our personality or behavior, we are far less likely to let that mask down, and there's really nothing that anyone can do. Also mentioned, some people are diagnosed later in life, they don't know how to separate themselves from the mask that they have created. It's nice to let employers know that employees know that they can be who they are and that they're truly safe to do that. That's one small step in the beginning, and then just time and proof that the environment is safe will allow them to reduce their mask. What was this other one? What happens when I don't have the energy to camouflage? Depending on the day I'm experiencing, we could meet for this first time and you may come away thinking of me as withdrawn, uninterested, direct, opinionated, distracted, even rude. And that's what happens when I don't have enough energy or spoons, as many say in the autistic community, to no longer mask and look neurotypical. So it brings me down. And because I feel a lot emotionally after these types of experiences, like I've let someone down or what have you, I'm fully aware of them and nearly powerless to make them any better. And they make me sad. So it can be really intense experience. And if you do know an autistic individual and they've conveyed to you that they had a day where they, had a tough day or something like that, or they've masked a lot, then you can definitely ask them about their day and if they are having no energy left to mask. So now we're going to move on and talk about relationships. One of the big things with relationships is actually autistic women, including myself, have unknowingly ended up in dangerous, high-risk situations. For many of us, this was because we have difficulty interpreting the negative behaviors or bad intentions of others. I think truly that a lot of us just really see the good in individuals and are less likely to be able to identify the negative. And also we, through no fault of our own, encounter these situations, and they can sometimes scar us for life. They can create post-traumatic stress, and they can impact us and reduce our ability to be successful and happy, or to even love ourselves or to be loved by others. There's a quote here that says, "I'm autistic," which means everyone around me has a disorder that makes them say things they don't mean. They don't care about structure. They fail to hyper-focus on singular important topics, and they have unreliable memories, drop weird hints, and creepily stare into my eyeballs. So autistics have our own perception of what non-autistics are like, and we often wonder, why are they different from us? The bottom of this is very important, of this quote. It says, why do people say that you're the weird one? And that's because there are more non-autistic individuals than there are autistic individuals. So sensory regulation and gender. You ever walk into the office and it's too cold or too hot? Ever battle with someone across the office over the thermostat? Yes. Yeah. So that's like, heat and temperature is one type of sensory input. So whoever answered that can say, well, I've experienced the sensory input negativity from my workplace. It might just be the temperature, but sensory processing and integration for autistics is quite different. Lights, sounds, smells, textures, or touch, visual movement, visual clutter, temperature. This can all cause dysregulation, also known as shutdown or meltdown. But dysregulation is, doesn't sound like we're children, because we're not. And so what do you do when you hear a loud noise? You might jump a little bit or maybe flinch. Autistics may bolt because sound hurts for many of us. Working under some lighting feels like being in a spotlight or as if you're directly looking at the sun. Textures of uniform fabrics and dress codes that demand heels, skirts, nylons, button up, those can all be troublesome. So for me, my sensory input is a lot about sight and sound. I have to wear comfortable clothes, but I wear rose-colored glasses to reduce some of the intensity of light. And I also wear noise-canceling headphones. They're not very cheap to get ones that work. They're about $300 to $350 for a really good pair. So gender identity and sexuality is unique to the autistic population in the extent that autistics are more likely to have diverse gender identities than those who are non-autistic. And while those that are assigned gender of the gender of female at birth might experience, research says they are more likely to experience gender, different gender identities. Autistic people as a group are more likely for that. So what can we do? Part of inclusion that is geared towards autistics includes some of the measures you may have already taken in the workplace. Formal and informal training on LGBTQIA+, their community, their challenges. This is needed to increase sensitivity and understanding and to reduce discrimination. Provide a single stall genderless bathroom for all employees to access at any time. Implement gender neutral work uniforms and dress codes, particularly for those individuals who may want to transition while staying in the same workplace. This will remove the confusion of whether or not they should wear a female uniform or a male uniform. As this is the same with dress codes, high heels, skirts, suit jackets, ties. Those are also gender reliant. And so if you have a gender neutral dress code, that can also be really inclusive for everyone involved. Supportive organizational climates, general social support, identity, unity, and acceptance of the transition process are also associated with improved mental health and positive workplace outcomes. So your support can go a long way to helping an individual during this time of their life. Some of the additional disability and diagnoses that are common in the autistic population is Ehlers-Danlos, Fragile X, movement disorders, auditory processing, epilepsy, migraines, and more. Learning differences and other forms of neurodivergent, as we mentioned, can also be coupled with autism. A lot of that is a comorbidity. Premenstrual dysmorphic disorder and polycystic ovarian syndrome and painful cycles are very common for autistic women. Panic disorder, anxiety, PTSD, and major depressive disorder can also be common due to some of the challenges that we experience in our day-to-day lives. Does anyone have any questions about sensory regulation, gender, or additional disabilities or diagnoses? I see one coming in. What is something I can offer my staff to help them sensory regulate? A great thing is to offer them the opportunity to go to a sensory room. And this would be a room where they can control the temperature, the light, and one that is in a space that it has reduced sound. If you don't have one of these in your workplace, that's totally fine. If you have an empty conference room or an empty office that someone can go and sit in for a little while, that's great. A lot of times we know how to self-regulate our overload from the sensory input. We just need the opportunity to have that. We might need to sit in our cars, we might need to go for a walk, but we don't necessarily need to be sent home or viewed as less productive than others, because we will make up that time, and we'll be grateful that we work in a workplace that offers us the opportunity to manage our own sensory regulation.
So Nicole, there's a question. It says, it appears there's a lot of overlap between autism and ADHD. Can you speak to any major differences?
Yeah, one of the major differences is sensory input. Though autistic ADHD individuals are also sensitive to sensory input, particularly visual clutter and clutter that might be around you because it distracts or makes it difficult to communicate. You lose your train of thought and whatnot. With autism, those sensory inputs it creates this internal noise that builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up. And if it builds up too high, it can be a total, end to our abilities for a few minutes, maybe even a day. So the sensory input is a little bit different to those differences.
And then another question is, if we see a coworker stimming, is there anything I should do?
Yeah, so stimming, we stim to reduce anxious feelings. Movement and anxiety is almost central to an autistic's existence. So we move a lot to sort of dispel this anxiety, to dispel uncomfortable internal sensations. We like to move. Some people might rock back and forth. I tend to sway side to side. Sometimes I'll pull at my ear. Sometimes I bite my lip. We all stim differently, and it's important to remember that some of us do it naturally, and it's not something that needs to be stopped or corrected. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're nervous or overloaded. However, it sometimes can. So if you're an autistic individual, you can also tell the people around you that if you feel comfortable in the environment, you can tell them why you do this. And if it's because you get really stressed out when you do it, you do it when you get really stressed out and someone notices it, you could say, hey, if you notice that I'm stimming, could you come over and ask me for some help? I might be really stressed out and not know how to reach out to ask for help. So it's really important to just always ask the worker themselves or the individual themselves about stimming and if there's anything that you can do. But don't be put off if they say no and that it's just natural to them, because oftentimes it is, and it is not something that needs to be corrected. And in fact, it should be welcomed in any workplace. I do it when I'm in super hyper focus mode too, and it's almost like an engine that drives me. So keep that in mind, that we are all different with regard to that.
I'll take one more and move on.
Yep.
Okay. What would be some reasonable accommodations at work?
For sensory regulation?
I'm assuming Nathan.
Yeah.
I would go with sensory.
Yep. So sensory would be headphones, allowing them to wear sunglasses in the workplace, allowing them to get away, as I mentioned, to a sensory room. Okay, I see autism. So we can also, if we're in an inclusive workplace and we have the ability to talk openly with our employees because we've established a trust connection with them, this is beyond the disclosure conversation. You can ask them the best ways to help support them in the workplace. They know what they need better than anyone else. I don't know what they need. They do. I can only give a few examples, but it's really important to just ask the individual themselves, because we all have different workarounds. I'm going to move on. We're going to talk about employment now, and this is the longest segment of the presentation. And excuse me, there's not a lot of questions or polls till we get to the end. Research by Baldwin and Costley has stated that the educational credentials of autistic women should place them in a favorable position in the labor market. However, unemployment and underemployment remain significant issues. So what are some of the barriers to our employment? Negative attitudes and bias, which I'll talk about more in a minute. Job descriptions, interviews, the inability or discomfort with promoting ourselves, difficulty with understanding how skills from a previous job or experience might transfer to the new job or experience. Accommodation usually requires someone to disclose their diagnoses and go through a rather complicated and uncomfortable process of providing documentation from a medical professional. In the autism community, we consider self-diagnosis valid because autistic diagnoses are extremely expensive. We're not all offered the same healthcare options. And quite honestly, they don't know enough about autism to catch individuals like myself and some of my friends. So it's really important in some workplaces to not require disclosure for accommodations. How about at Grit and Flow, we tell people to just say, I work best when, to take that medical diagnosis out of it. Why wouldn't you want your employees to be performing at their best? And, you know, a lot of people think that, you know, providing accommodations costs a lot of money. But the truth is that according to JAN, the Job Accommodation Network, 56% of adjustments cost nothing at all. And the rest cost a one-time investment average of $500, which has stayed consistent for many years. So this just isn't now, this is always. I entered the workplace at 15 on a worker's permit, and I enjoyed all kinds of jobs, and I tried all kinds of different things because I was curious, and our guidance counselors didn't encourage college or really guide us on any way to begin a career. And so I would interview, and I would have a lot of trouble because interviewers would ask me from a negative perspective, why have you done so many jobs? And often I wasn't hired because my job history didn't show a clear interest in one field or another. But as I mentioned, I'm insatiably curious and was interested in trying out positions. And so because I had no idea what I wanted to do for work, I thought, hey, if I get experience in all these different places, I'll actually be a more marketable, valuable employee because I'll have this great diverse skill set. So when I got bored with entry-level positions and decided to enter college, I didn't know it at the time, but my inability to understand human behavior led me to pursue a degree in psychology. I graduated, and after my undergrad, I applied to about 100 jobs, and I only received a few responses back and only one invite for an interview. And I couldn't understand why. I also didn't know about the application game that companies and HR were creating with the use of applicant tracking systems. And so when I wasn't getting hired, I thought I just need to be a more marketable job seeker. I need a higher education level because, you know, society always says education, education. That's the way to success. So I assumed a higher degree would be my key to success. And I actually thought when I started my master's degree that if I had gained, once I am at the end of the degree and I have it in my hand, there would be a built-in job for me at the end, because who wouldn't want to hire someone with different skills and abilities and a higher level of education? But a job search during my master's degree assured me that a degree would change nothing. And it broke my heart. A member of an organization that I was involved with actually referred me as a top candidate to an open position that they had at their organization. And it was an entry-level position, and I was highly qualified for it. And I entered the interview, and after the panel interview, I was not offered the job. So whenever I'm not offered a job, I always ask for feedback so that I can learn how to be better going forward. And the person giving me the feedback told me I looked too nervous. Well, then when I explained to them one of the panel interviewers' intense form of interviewing me and asking really intense questions, she said, oh, that's his shtick. That's what he does. He tries to make people uncomfortable in interviews to see how they respond. And I understand that some jobs, it's really important to know how people are going to respond under pressure, but there are other ways to see how someone would respond in an intense environment that can wait until after the first interview. More than autistic and neurodivergent people experience anxiety. And if necessary, conduct the first interview by phone and then schedule the second one in person. There are thousands of autistic and other neurodivergent people with skills that outweigh the jobs that we're applying for. Many of us find interviewing overwhelming and difficult, and as a result, often perform poorly and don't get hired. Hiring managers are missing out on a lot of highly qualified candidates because of the complex efficiency at all costs hiring methods that we've developed over the last 5 to 10 years. So what this is this you know, if you're not taking the time to invest in your human capital, you will lose financial capital, because humans that work in your organization as a workforce, they are your ticket to success. I mean, imagine where, if you're here and you're a business owner, imagine what it would be like if you lost your entire workforce in one day. Where would your business go? So it's important for places to really look at their processes for interviewing to be more inclusive. And, you know, the grasp for talent right now is a very common struggle for a lot of businesses. And if you make these adjustments to your interviewing and job descriptions, in fact, Grit and Flow is going to be holding a series of webinars coming up soon that we'll advertise when we have it, but on how to create inclusive job descriptions, because this is really the first greeting that you get from a company. This is the first impression that you get. And so if it's not an inclusive impression that you get, you may walk away. So after applying what I learned in college about networking, I went to LinkedIn, and I had heard from something that Temple Grandin said, that it's helpful to try to use the back door to entering employment. So that's what I did. I developed this really great LinkedIn profile. I took some of my homework assignments from my master's and I kind of converted them into articles that I could publish. And then I started reaching out to everyone that I could to ask them, you know, what's your role in the neurodivergent community or autistic community? And what do you do? And how did you get to where you are? So a lot of informational interviewing and online networking. And it was successful for me because my networking is how I was introduced to Tiffany and became a part of Grit and Flow. And I'm honored to be here today. And it's largely due to not having to interview for the position. Our conversations through email and chats over the phone, combined with my LinkedIn profile that had my list of skills and my previous work experience, as well as some articles that I had written, that showed Tiffany that I was a good hire. And because of support like this, my loyalty to any job is high, very high. But because of how I have been treated with Grit and Flow, that has reached a whole new level of highness. 5 years ago, I couldn't imagine a day like today that would be in my future. So I'm grateful. And this is the real thing that happens when you do provide inclusiveness in your workplace. It will stay with people. And so this really also all boils down to the first point on the slide, which is the largest barrier for autistics and neurodivergent individuals that they face when they're trying to enter the workforce is the negative attitudes of HR and business leaders towards disability, and the notion that we are less than and cannot work or do not want to work. Think about it. We are not holding ourselves back. Often autistics like myself live in a world that tells us not to disclose our autism at work. But why? Honest talk is really that if the work world embraced our differences, we would not have to hide our identity and we would be free to disclose. And by encouraging us not to disclose, we are essentially being told to keep the core of ourselves secret, to blend in, to conform to a society that does not fully understand us, and quite honestly, until recently, had little desire to understand us or include us. The second largest barrier that we face to securing and sustaining employment are what we've already talked about: job descriptions, applications, interviewing styles, onboarding processes. These are all designed in a way that overlooks the talent of autistic and neurodivergent individuals, based mostly on social conventions and how they feel around us during the interview process. It also includes updating, this is all stuff that Grit and Flow can work with you to do too. If you have a company or you're an individual that wants to bring inclusiveness to your company, Grit and Flow works with organizations and corporations to help them with updating their hiring processes and leadership styles to promote inclusion for all neurodivergent and disabled individuals. We help to create a culture of acceptance. And, I mentioned earlier that we'll be offering a series of workshops to create inclusive job descriptions, but we're always offering some training or some free professional development in some way that allows you to learn more, to become more aware, to have an understanding and foster acceptance. And so increasing inclusion in the workplace, adjustments, we talked all about this. Make your accommodation process easy and clear. Install a no tolerance bullying policy that also has accountability to the people who are being the ones to bully others. I've said this many times, and my community would agree that we need to move way beyond awareness to acceptance and support. And we need to be sure to assess the workplace culture that we're in and leadership styles and their buy-in before engaging in a hiring program. Hiring programs are not enough to be successful in themselves. They need organizational change in order to support them in the best way. Once you develop these things, the more you advertise them and include us in their images of your branding materials and on your websites, make your websites and your application processes fully accessible to screen readers, all this kind of stuff. We can help you with all of that. So one final note before we get into some question and answers is that autism is not something that we can separate from who we are. And this is a note from me. We are not people with autism. We cannot leave it behind. We are autistic people. Autism is central to is a central part of our existence. And many of us appreciate our autistic strengths and traits. We do not need to be cured. We want others to understand us and embrace our differences. Let us be open about our identity in the workplace and live our lives authentically without discrimination. We overwhelmingly want to work, but we did not build the systems that currently exclude us. Therefore, we need the help of corporations and individuals to promote and include autistic voices and neurodivergent individuals in organizational decisions, product development, positions of leadership. Offer us advancement opportunities for sustainable employment. Don't keep us at the bottom. The chance to be on the board of directors even to help affect organizational change that can make your company more inclusive. Really, our society has been aware of autism for decades, multiple decades. So we should be way beyond the point of awareness, and autistic acceptance even is overdue. We're here and we're ready to work, but that back door or that door is locked. And, we didn't lock those doors. So we're here and ready to work. And if organizations can progress forward to unlock those doors for us and make a dedicated effort to open, the possibility for us to be in the workplace and supported as our full authentic selves, that would be amazing. And it would change the landscape of how many autistic individuals are unemployed or underemployed. Finally, we are not complex puzzle pieces. In fact, most of us are disgusted with the puzzle piece as a symbol of autism. In fact, many people in the autistic community view it as a symbol of hate. It also tells us that an organization doesn't really understand us and doesn't know what we prefer and desire or what we find offensive. So autistics, this is the last thing I want you to take away with you today, and then we'll get into some questions. Autistics are people first, and we want and deserve meaningful employment that comes with a sense of purpose and to be treated with dignity in the workplace, just like all humans do. And so with that, I will open up. Oh, first I should say, this was not created by just me. I used many academic references and resources in order to create this webinar and to write the papers that I've released on my LinkedIn page. If you would like to read them, they're also posted on the Grit and Flow page and on our website under our conversation tabs. Before we get into question and answering, we have a survey that Tiffany is going to post into the chat box that we would like for you to fill out just so that we can improve our training over time and make our future events more, helpful for the audience who's attending. So here's the question and answer. So again, you can enter your question in chat. It's not anonymous. You can send it directly to Tiffany, i.e. me. If you want to keep your name separate or not in the chat, and you can send it through this poll. So Tiffany, did anyone have any questions that you might want me to answer before some questions come in on the poll?
There were a lot. So there were a lot of really good things. I think, the job description came up as a big thing, and I'm kind of waiting for some answers. I'm going blank. Anybody want to jump in here with their questions? I'm going through all the pages. I think there were some questions about, oh my goodness, this being the best 45 minutes of their life. That was a good thing. Oh, why do you use women with an X?
Women with an X is an inclusive term used because women can involve, different gender identities, different preferences for identification. Some individuals, we're talking about women because the research separates men and women about autism, but we realize that some people who are born female, they grow up, that's not the choice that they stay with, but that doesn't mean that they're excluded from the conversation. So we use an X to be very inclusive.
So there were questions about women and men when it comes to sensitivities. Do you find that women have higher sensory requirements or challenges than men in your research?
Yeah, research does show that women are typically more overwhelmed by sensory input, but it may be because we are also more likely to strive and try to engage with others socially. We're also very good at camouflaging, so we can at some point be really burnt out and not be able.
So if you've gone through a meltdown, and we all know, I call it the hangover. It's kind of my description. I see it with my son who's autistic. I've seen it various people. So how can you communicate with a workplace? You've had, your burnout, you've had your situation, it's been resolved, but that hangover part, how do you make them understand that?
Yeah, I know. Like the onus is always on the autistic to describe everything, because there's not real knowledge out there about the actual experiences of our lives that really impact us. In fact, people have been designing things for us for years without including us. So if you're in the workplace and you've had a meltdown or a burnout, if you've left for a long period of time, obviously that would be great to, express with HR and to share with HR, but you can also just bring up the conversation with your supervisor if you feel comfortable enough doing so. If not, bring it up to your HR. It is really difficult to recover from dysregulation sometimes, especially if it's a really intense dysregulation. If I have a panic attack, I need to sleep. I need to sometimes just disconnect entirely. And if I don't right away, then sometimes it can make it even worse, and it can last even longer for me to get back on track. So sometimes, we don't always need to leave the workplace. Sometimes we just need to get away for a minute. But if we're in a workplace that's really intense and you have individuals that are calling out regularly, it might be because they're autistic and they're overwhelmed in their workplace, or that they've had, something going on. It might be there's a lot of things, again, that you can do. Don't touch a person if they're in the middle of a meltdown. Try to approach them and talk to them. But, go ahead.
Yeah, I've one more question, but just regarding that, what I've been teaching, not teaching, but consulting with a lot of people in the workplace is to establish a code word with their supervisor when they're having that overwhelmed feeling or they need that. I'll say, I'm going to get peanuts, something like that. And then the supervisor respectfully knows they just need to go, we call it doing a lap, do a lap outside, do a lap, something like that before things fester and get worse. So I highly suggest having those conversations and setting up those little things that still give you privacy, but also the space you need. And we have time for one more question. It says, how can employers, or how can we help our employers promote inclusivity and or awareness among employees in the hiring process?
The most important thing to fostering inclusion is sometimes the mere awareness. And, you know, the other thing that, Tiffany, can you ask me the question again? I've been talking for so long, my brain is
Yeah,
frazzling.
no, I get it. So it's about employers, you know, how could we help them promote inclusivity? And I can help Nicole with this answer too.
Oh yeah, you're great with this
Yeah.
answer.
Well, we're a team. So we believe it starts with education, because a lot of individuals don't understand it. I mean, I spend a lot of time when I talk to companies just explaining the non-visible nature of neurodivergent. So people don't realize you can't see it. Then they realize, well, if you can't see it, how do they disclose? How do they ask for accommodations? So making businesses understand it's really not that simple as someone rolling in with a wheelchair saying, hey, you know, I need a little help with the ramp. It's a lot more complicated. We also believe starting to look at, you know, the recruiting materials, making them more inclusive, but even just the process, making, you know, you're thinking of everything they do into a multi-learner style. I think that's a good way to start. Can you see it? Can you feel it? Can you touch it? How does that person learn? Have all your policies, procedures, onboarding, everything in multiple media to support people. And if you start doing things like that, it starts just creating that environment and those things to get things going in the right direction. And then people will start to get more successful through interviews. But it is a lot of education.
Yeah, you can also establish an employee resource group in your organization for parents of neurodivergent or disabled individuals, and those people themselves in the workplace. Get those two sides together in a room, and they're able to talk about some of their challenges and experiences, and some of what comes out of that can actually help create more inclusive policies in the workplace.
And then there was one last question. We don't know how many people are camouflaging. We don't know. More than we think, I think, is the answer to that, for various reasons. And that's why it's unable, we don't have a figure on the unemployment rate for the autistic population, because one, women are still just getting diagnosed now. The self-disclosure, or the self-diagnosis isn't taken into account. And, you know, it's just people aren't saying they are because of all the stigma. So we don't even have true statistics about what the current landscape is, but we know it's bad. So I just want to compliment Nicole for the autistic women here and men, knowing to put on a 1-hour seminar and to speak so much about personal experiences is not an easy task. Nicole has done a phenomenal job. I learn a lot every time she talks. Her talk about grit and flow definitely brought a little tear to my eye. You know, I just encourage you to be yourself as you go out. And, you know, Nicole is a great role model, and I'm happy, you know, she's able to do this for you guys. And maybe if you send this link out, which we'll put on our media, you can get more people to understand this. Send it to your bosses, have them look at it. It'll be really helpful. We did live stream this. So we'll put that link out there on LinkedIn and our website. And then also we'll have this recorded in some other means. So just keep up to speed on grit and flow, and we'll go ahead and take care of getting you aware of all that. Last thing is we have another webinar coming up May 26th. So what my dissertation work is on, you know, HR managers, why are they not hiring? So we're going to talk about what I've learned, and it's that fear factor. And we're going to break down those fears and talk about ways we can address that. So you can register now, gritandflow.com. And I'm also going to put the link in the chat, but we would really appreciate it if you guys would fill out the survey. I think we need a lot of hand clapping for Nicole right now. Can everybody get their little icons on? I want to see them flying up the screen. Woohoo, and hearts. Come on, I want to see them. Yeah, because she was amazing. So
Thank you all. Tiffany does know that, I mean, I could probably appeared very well today, but Tiffany is no stranger to my challenges off screen, and she helps accommodate me in any way that she can so that I can be successful like this and provide individuals this type of information. So thank you, Tiffany.
wow, I love you, man. All right. All right. Everybody have a great day, and we look forward to seeing you guys at the next webinar. Thank you so much. Peace
Bye.
out.